She was a widow with 3 daughters. He was a runaway with nothing left to lose. But when their paths crossed one snowy night in 1858, everything changed. What happened in that barn would spark a chain of events that no one, especially them, could have predicted. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked this story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. In the harsh winter of 1858, Eleanor Prescott stood at the edge of her property, watching the snow blanket the rolling fields of her small farm in Virginia. 3 years had passed since her husband Thomas died of pneumonia, leaving her with 3 young daughters and a farm to manage. At 32, Eleanor's once soft features had hardened with determination, her brown hair now streaked with premature strands of silver. "Mama," called 8-year-old Mary, the youngest of her daughters, running through the snow. "Sarah says there's someone in the barn." Eleanor's heart quickened. Living just miles from the border of free states made her farm an occasional waypoint for those seeking freedom on the Underground Railroad, though she'd never actively participated. "Stay here with your sisters," Eleanor instructed, grabbing her husband's old rifle from above the door. She rarely touched it, but these were uncertain times. The barn door creaked as she pushed it open, rifle raised. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steadier than her hands. A rustling came from behind a stack of hay. Slowly, a man emerged, tall but hunched, painfully thin, with haunted eyes that spoke of unspeakable suffering. His clothes were tattered and his feet wrapped in bloodied rags. Most striking were the raw, wounded wrists that told of recently escaped shackles. "Please," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I mean no harm. Just one night of shelter." Eleanor hesitated. Harboring a runaway slave was illegal, dangerous. If caught, she could lose everything: her farm, her freedom, her daughters. "What's your name?" she asked, lowering the rifle slightly. "Isaiah," he replied. "They called me Samuel at the plantation, but my mother named me Isaiah." Something in his dignified bearing, despite his condition, moved Eleanor. She thought of Thomas, who had always said that a person's character showed most clearly in moments of desperation. "You can stay tonight," she decided, "but you'll need to move on before dawn." That night, after her daughters were asleep, Eleanor brought Isaiah a bowl of stew and a blanket. "Why would you help me?" he asked, watching her warily. "You could be punished." Eleanor poked at the small fire she'd built in the barn's stone pit. "My husband used to say that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about doing what's right despite your fear." Isaiah studied her face in the firelight. "He sounds like a wise man." "He was," Eleanor said softly. "He'd have done the same." As they talked through the night, Isaiah revealed pieces of his story: born on a plantation in Georgia, separated from his mother at 10, sold twice before ending up at a plantation known for its cruelty just 20 miles south. "I taught myself to read," he confessed. "From scraps of newspaper and discarded books. They'd whip a man for less." Eleanor was struck by his quiet intelligence, his determination. "My eldest daughter, Elizabeth, has been struggling with her reading." Perhaps. She stopped herself, realizing the impossibility of what she was considering. But as dawn approached and snow continued to fall, covering any tracks that might have been followed, Eleanor made a decision that would change all their lives. "The patrol won't travel in this weather," she said. "You can stay until the storm passes. There's a small room above the barn where we store hay. It's warm enough." Isaiah looked at her with disbelief. "Why would you risk so much for a stranger?" Eleanor herself wasn't entirely sure. Perhaps it was the hollow grief she still carried. Or perhaps it was simply the human connection she'd been missing since Thomas died. All she knew was that turning Isaiah out into the storm felt wrong in a way she couldn't ignore. "Sometimes," she said, "the right path finds you, rather than the other way around." The winter storm lasted 3 days, transforming the landscape into an unbroken blanket of white. During this time, Isaiah remained hidden in the hayloft, venturing down only when Eleanor assured him it was safe. Her daughters Elizabeth, Catherine, 10, and Mary, 8, were told only that a traveler needed shelter from the storm. On the 4th morning, Eleanor found Isaiah examining a broken plow in the corner of the barn. "This could be fixed," he said, not looking up. "The metal's still good, just needs reshaping." "You know farming equipment?" Eleanor asked, surprised. Isaiah nodded. "I worked the field since I was a boy, but the overseer noticed I had a way with tools. Made me help the blacksmith when things broke." His fingers traced the plow's curve. "I can repair this before I go. Small thanks for your kindness." Eleanor hesitated. With spring planting approaching and no hired help she could afford, the farm's success hung in precarious balance. The storms cleared, but the roads will be muddy for days. Patrols won't be out yet. It was an unspoken extension of his stay. That afternoon, Elizabeth discovered Isaiah working in the barn. Instead of running to tell her mother, she watched silently as his strong hands skillfully repaired the broken plow. "Are you a blacksmith?" she finally asked, startling him. Isaiah nearly dropped his tools. "Miss, you shouldn't be here." "This is our barn," Elizabeth replied with childish logic. "And Mother knows you're here." She stepped closer, curious rather than afraid. "I'm Elizabeth Prescott." Despite his caution, Isaiah smiled. "I'm Isaiah. Can you read, Isaiah?" she asked suddenly. The question took him aback. "Yes, miss, I can." Elizabeth's face brightened. "I struggle with reading. Mother tries to help, but she's always so busy with the farm." She kicked at the hay with her boot. "Father used to read with me every night before." "I'm sorry about your father," Isaiah said gently. That evening, Eleanor found them sitting on hay bales, Elizabeth sounding out words from her primer while Isaiah patiently guided her. Eleanor cleared her throat, and Isaiah immediately stood. "Mrs. Prescott, I was just teaching my daughter," Eleanor finished. She wasn't angry. Instead, she felt a strange relief. Elizabeth had withdrawn after Thomas died, showing little interest in learning. Over dinner that night, Eleanor made a proposition. "The farm needs tending, and I can't manage alone. Isaiah has skills we need." She looked at her daughters carefully. "If he stays to help us through planting season, it must remain our secret. Do you understand why?" Catherine, always practical, nodded. "Because the law says he belongs to someone else, even though people can't belong to other people." "Yes," Eleanor said, surprised by her daughter's perception. "Exactly that." "Will he live in the barn forever?" Mary asked, wide-eyed. "No, sweetheart. Just until we figure out something more permanent." Later, alone with Isaiah, Eleanor explained her proposition properly. "I can offer food, shelter, and a small wage I'll set aside for you. When it's safe, I'll help you continue north." Isaiah studied her, searching for deceit and finding none. "Why would you do this?" Eleanor looked out toward the fields, still snow-covered, but soon to need tending. "Because this farm was my husband's dream, and I'm failing to keep it alive. Because my daughters need education I have little time to provide." She met his eyes. "And because helping you feels like the first right thing I've done in a long time." "People will talk if they see me working your land," Isaiah warned. "Let them," Eleanor replied with more confidence than she felt. "You'll be my hired help, a freedman with papers I'll forge if necessary." The risk was enormous, but as winter slowly relented to spring, the Prescott farm saw new life. Isaiah's knowledge of crops and equipment brought improvements Eleanor hadn't considered. The plow horses responded to his gentle handling, and the broken equipment in the barn found new purpose under his skilled hands. Most evenings, after chores were done, Isaiah would sit with Elizabeth, patiently helping her overcome her reading difficulties. Soon, Catherine and Mary joined these sessions, enthralled by the stories Isaiah would tell afterward, tales his mother had shared of their African ancestors, of courage and wisdom that had traveled across oceans in the hearts of the enslaved. One evening, as rain pattered against the windows, Mary asked innocently, "Isaiah, do you have a family?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Isaiah's hand paused as he turned a page in the book. "I had a mother," he said carefully, "and 2 sisters. We were separated long ago." "Do you miss them?" Mary persisted. "Every day," Isaiah answered, his voice steady despite the pain Eleanor could see in his eyes. But I carry them here. He touched his heart. Just as you carry your father. That night, after the girls were asleep, Eleanor found Isaiah sitting alone on the porch steps, gazing at the stars. I apologize for Mary's questions, she said, sitting beside him. Children ask what adults dare not, Isaiah replied. It's their gift. They sat in comfortable silence until Isaiah spoke again. I had a wife once. Her name was Ruth. She was sold to a plantation in Louisiana 7 years ago. Eleanor felt the weight of his loss. I'm sorry. I tried to find her. That's why I ran, not just for freedom, but to search for her. His voice cracked slightly. The overseer caught me looking at maps. The beating nearly killed me. Eleanor fought the urge to reach for his hand. Instead, she shared her own grief. When Thomas died, I wanted to die too. The girls were the only reason I didn't. Does it get easier? Isaiah asked. Not easier, Eleanor replied honestly. Just different. You learn to carry it. As spring blossomed around them, something else quietly grew, a friendship built on mutual respect and shared purpose. For the first time since Thomas's death, Eleanor found herself looking forward to each day, to conversations that challenged and comforted her in equal measure. Yet even as the farm flourished under their combined efforts, Eleanor knew that Isaiah's presence remained a dangerous secret they couldn't keep forever. By early summer, the Prescott farm had transformed. Fields that had lain partially fallow the previous year now burst with corn, wheat, and vegetables. The barn, once leaning precariously, stood straight again after Isaiah reinforced its structure. The change wasn't limited to the land. Laughter had returned to the Prescott home. Eleanor watched her daughters blossom in Isaiah's presence. Elizabeth's reading had improved dramatically. Catherine had discovered a talent for arithmetic with Isaiah's encouragement. And little Mary followed him everywhere, peppering him with endless questions he always answered with patience. One warm evening, as fireflies began to dot the twilight, Eleanor found Isaiah carving something on the back porch. What are you making? She asked, offering him a cup of cool water. Isaiah held up a small wooden horse. For Mary's birthday. She mentioned it's next week. Eleanor sat beside him, touched by his thoughtfulness. She'd treasure it. Your daughters have been a gift to me, Isaiah said quietly. I never thought I'd know what it feels like to teach a child again. Again? Eleanor questioned. Isaiah's hands stilled. I had a son. He would be about Elizabeth's age now. His voice remained steady, but Eleanor saw the pain in his eyes. He was sold with his mother. I don't even know if he remembers me. Eleanor's heart ached for him. Without thinking, she placed her hand over his. I'm sorry, Isaiah. He looked at their hands, then at her face. Something unspoken passed between them, understanding, compassion, and perhaps something deeper neither dared name. The moment was shattered by the sound of approaching horses. Isaiah immediately stood, alert to danger. Get inside, Eleanor urged, but it was too late. 2 riders were already turning up the drive, Jeremiah Wilson, owner of the neighboring farm, and Sheriff Collins. Stay calm, Eleanor whispered. Remember, you're a hired freedman. The men dismounted, and Eleanor stepped forward with a forced smile. Jeremiah, Sheriff. What brings you by so late? Sheriff Collins, a man who wore his authority like an ill-fitting coat, eyed Isaiah suspiciously. Evening, Mrs. Prescott. Don't believe I've met your helper. Isaiah Johnson, she replied smoothly. He's been assisting with the spring planting and repairs. Mighty fortunate to find such help, Jeremiah remarked, his tone suggesting he found it more suspicious than fortunate, especially when most men are busy with their own land. Isaiah kept his eyes appropriately lowered, a posture that clearly went against his nature, but was necessary for survival. Mr. Johnson has his papers, Eleanor said firmly, and his help has been invaluable. Now, what can I do for you gentlemen? Sheriff Collins removed his hat. There have been reports of a runaway from the Madison plantation. Tall fellow, skilled with tools. Thought you might have seen something. Eleanor maintained her composure. I'm afraid not. We keep to ourselves mostly. Jeremiah's eyes narrowed. Indeed you do, Eleanor. ever since Thomas passed. Some might say too much to yourself. Eleanor bristled at the familiar use of her name and the veiled criticism. My focus has been on my daughters and this farm, as it should be. The sheriff looked past her to the house. Your girls doing well? Very well, thank you, Eleanor replied, hoping the children would stay inside. No such luck. The door opened, and Elizabeth stepped out. Mother, Mary's asking for. She stopped short at the sight of visitors. Sheriff Collins smiled. Well now, Miss Elizabeth, growing into a fine young lady. He turned to Isaiah. Your papers, Johnson. I'd like to see them. Eleanor's heart raced. The forged papers she'd created were inside, and while they might pass casual inspection, the sheriff's scrutiny was another matter. Isaiah remained calm. Of course, sir. They're in my quarters in the barn. I'll fetch them. I'll accompany you, the sheriff said. As they walked toward the barn, Jeremiah stepped closer to Eleanor. You're playing a dangerous game, Eleanor, he murmured. A widow alone with 3 girls, and a strange man living on your property. Isaiah works for me, nothing more, Eleanor replied coldly. For now, Jeremiah said. But people talk. And I've offered to buy this land from you before. My offer still stands. Life would be easier for you and your girls. Eleanor met his gaze directly. This land is my daughter's inheritance. It's not for sale. In the barn, Isaiah moved deliberately, retrieving the papers from a hidden spot beneath a floorboard. As he handed them to the sheriff, he maintained the deferential manner expected of him, all while calculating how quickly he could run, if necessary. Sheriff Collins examined the papers, holding them up to the lantern light. These look newly made. Yes, sir, Isaiah replied. My previous papers were damaged in a rainstorm. Mrs. Prescott helped me obtain new ones. The sheriff grunted, seemingly satisfied but not pleased. Make sure you keep them on you at all times. There's rewards for runaways, and some men don't ask questions before claiming them. When they returned to the house, Jeremiah was still trying to convince Eleanor of something, stopping abruptly when they approached. Everything in order? He asked the sheriff. Appears so, Sheriff Collins replied, though his tone suggested lingering doubts. After the men departed, Eleanor and Isaiah stood in tense silence until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. They suspect, Isaiah said quietly. Eleanor nodded. Jeremiah has wanted this land since before Thomas died. He'll look for any reason to discredit me. She looked toward the barn. You need to go, tonight. And leave you to face them alone? Isaiah shook his head. They'll be watching the roads now. Eleanor knew he was right. Then we need a better plan than waiting to be discovered. That night, after the girls were asleep, Eleanor and Isaiah sat at the kitchen table, speaking in hushed tones. There's a Quaker settlement 2 days' journey north, Eleanor explained. Thomas had connections there. They could help you get to Canada. Isaiah listened, but his expression remained troubled. And what happens to you and the girls after I'm gone? Wilson won't stop pressuring you. Eleanor hadn't allowed herself to consider the emptiness Isaiah's departure would create, not just the practical help, but the companionship, the conversations that had rekindled something in her she thought had died with Thomas. We'll manage, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Isaiah reached across the table, hesitantly taking her hand. Eleanor, these past months, I've found something I never thought possible again. Peace, purpose. He paused, gathering courage. Family. The word hung between them, charged with meaning. Eleanor felt tears threatening. Isaiah, I know it's impossible, he continued quickly. I know the world wouldn't allow it. But I need you to know that what you've given me, what your daughters have given me, is precious beyond words. Eleanor couldn't speak past the emotion tightening her throat. Instead, she squeezed his hand, allowing herself this one moment of honesty before reality reasserted itself. Outside, a dog barked in the distance, reminding them of the dangers that lay beyond these walls. Tomorrow they would plan Isaiah's escape. Tonight, they allowed themselves to acknowledge what might have been in a different world. Dawn broke with uncomfortable clarity, the summer sun revealing a world that offered no shadows to hide in. Eleanor moved through her morning routine mechanically, her mind racing with plans and fears. The previous night's conversation with Isaiah had left her both strengthened and shattered, acknowledging feelings that could never be realized in the world they inhabited. Elizabeth, perceptive beyond her years, noticed her mother's distraction. "Is Isaiah leaving?" she asked directly as they collected eggs from the henhouse. Eleanor nearly dropped the basket. "Why would you ask that?" "I heard you talking last night," Elizabeth admitted. "And I saw how the sheriff looked at him." Eleanor knelt to her daughter's level. "Isaiah needs to go somewhere safer, where he can truly be free." Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. "But he belongs with us. He makes you smile again." The simple observation pierced Eleanor's heart. "Sometimes, sweetheart, what we want can't overcome what is." As they returned to the house, Eleanor was surprised to see Jeremiah Wilson's wagon approaching. Dread pooled in her stomach. "Take these inside," she told Elizabeth, handing her the egg basket. "And tell Isaiah to stay out of sight." Jeremiah wasn't alone. Sheriff Collins and 2 other men accompanied him. This wasn't a casual visit. "Eleanor," Jeremiah called, his false friendliness gone. "We need to speak with Johnson." Eleanor stood her ground on the porch steps. "He's not here. I sent him to town for supplies." Sheriff Collins dismounted. "Strange. We've had men watching the road since last night. Nobody's passed." The trap closed around her. "Why are you really here, Jeremiah?" Jeremiah produced a paper from his coat. "We received word from the Madison plantation. Their runaway matches your hired help exactly. Even the name is similar. They called him Samuel, but his African name was Isaiah." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "My worker has papers. You saw them yourself, Sheriff." "Forgeries," the sheriff replied dismissively. "Good ones, but forgeries nonetheless." One of the men with them stepped forward, a slave catcher. Judging by his rough appearance and the tracking dogs straining at their leashes beside him. "Mrs. Prescott," the sheriff continued, his tone hardening, "harboring a runaway is a serious offense. For your daughter's sake, tell us where he is." Eleanor's mind raced. Isaiah had planned to hide in the root cellar if trouble came, a temporary measure at best. "Mother?" Mary appeared in the doorway, her small face confused by the gathering of men. "Go back inside, sweetheart," Eleanor called, trying to keep her voice steady. "Let us search the property, Eleanor," Jeremiah pressed. "If he's not here, as you claim, you have nothing to fear." Eleanor knew she was cornered. "I want to see a proper warrant." The sheriff produced another paper. "Signed by Judge Harmon this morning." As Eleanor took the paper with trembling hands, she caught movement from the corner of her eye. Isaiah emerging from behind the barn, walking steadily toward them. "No," she whispered. Isaiah approached with dignity, his hands visible and unthreatening. "I'm the man you're looking for," he announced clearly. "Mrs. Prescott and her daughters knew nothing. I told them I was a freedman." The slave catcher grinned triumphantly. "Samuel, you've led us on quite a chase." "My name is Isaiah," he corrected firmly, even as the men moved to seize him. Eleanor stepped forward. "Wait," her mind worked frantically. "I want to buy his freedom." Jeremiah laughed. "With what money, Eleanor? Everyone knows you can barely keep this farm running." Isaiah caught her gaze, silently pleading with her not to sacrifice herself. "The farm," she said suddenly. "I'll sell you the farm, Jeremiah. You've wanted it long enough." In exchange, you arranged to purchase Isaiah from the Madison plantation. A shocked silence followed her declaration. "Mother, no!" Elizabeth cried from the doorway, where she stood with her sisters. Jeremiah studied Eleanor's face, seeing her desperation and using it to his advantage. "The farm for a runaway slave? That's poor business, Eleanor." "The farm is worth 10 times any price they'd ask for him," Eleanor argued. "You know it." Sheriff Collins shifted uncomfortably. "This is irregular, Wilson." Jeremiah ignored him, focusing on Eleanor. "And where would you go? What would you do?" Isaiah interrupted. "Mrs. Prescott, don't do this. I won't have you sacrifice your husband's legacy." Eleanor looked at her daughters' frightened faces, then back to Isaiah, the man who had brought life back to their home, who had taught her children, who had somehow begun to heal the wound Thomas's death had left. "Some legacies are not in land," she said quietly. After a moment of calculation, Jeremiah nodded. "Very well. I'll draw up the papers immediately. And Isaiah stays here until the transaction with the Madison plantation is complete," Eleanor insisted. The sheriff looked ready to object, but Jeremiah raised a hand. "Agreed. I'll post a man to ensure he doesn't run again." As the men conferred, Isaiah was allowed to approach Eleanor under watch. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Your daughters need this home." Eleanor met his eyes steadily. "My daughters need to know that some things matter more than land or money. That people aren't property to be bought and sold." She took a shaky breath. "And I need you to know that you are worth everything to us." The following week passed in a blur of legal arrangements. Eleanor signed away the farm that had been her home for 15 years, watching as Jeremiah's signature replaced hers on the deed. In exchange, he presented her with papers declaring Isaiah Johnson a free man, purchased from the Madison plantation for a sum that was indeed a fraction of the farm's value. On their last evening in the farmhouse, Eleanor sat on the porch with Isaiah, watching the sunset paint the fields they would soon leave behind. "My cousin in Ohio wrote back," Eleanor said. "She says there's a small house available near her, and the school there will take the girls." Isaiah nodded. "It's a free state. We can start over." The word "we" hung between them, tentative but full of possibility. "It won't be easy," Eleanor warned. "The prejudice doesn't end at the Mason-Dixon line." "Nothing worthwhile is easy," Isaiah replied. "But we'll face it together." He hesitated. "If that's what you want." Eleanor looked out at the land she was leaving, surprised to find that the pain of loss was overshadowed by the hope of what lay ahead. "When Thomas died, I thought my life was over. I existed only for my daughters." She turned to face Isaiah. "You reminded me that hearts can heal, that courage isn't just about enduring, but about choosing a different path when the old one becomes impossible." In the kitchen window, she could see her daughters preparing their last meal in this house, their faces animated as they worked together. In their resilience, she found her own. "Yes," she said finally, "together is what I want." The following morning, as they loaded their wagon with the possessions they were permitted to take, Jeremiah arrived to oversee their departure. "I never thought you'd choose a slave over your husband's land," he remarked, unable to comprehend her decision. Eleanor helped Mary up onto the wagon seat before turning to him. "Thomas wouldn't recognize this place under your ownership, Jeremiah, but he would recognize the choice I made." She climbed onto the wagon. "Some things can't be bought or sold: dignity, courage, love. I hope you learn that someday." Isaiah took the reins, his newly signed free papers safely tucked inside his coat. As the wagon pulled away, the girls looked back at the only home they'd ever known. But Eleanor faced forward, toward the uncertain but hopeful future they would build together. The road ahead would be difficult. A white widow and a black freedman with 3 young girls would face obstacles at every turn. But as the farm receded into the distance, Eleanor felt a weight lifting. They were traveling not just toward Ohio, but toward possibility, the possibility of creating a family bound not by convention, but by choice, respect, and love. As they crested the hill that would take their old home out of sight forever, little Mary asked, "Are we going to be all right, Mama?" Eleanor reached for Isaiah's hand, a gesture now made in the open without fear. "Yes, my sweet girl. Different, but all right." Isaiah's fingers tightened around hers as they continued their journey north, leaving behind the land but carrying with them the most precious harvest, the family they had found in each other.